Hi, Dina. Thank you so much for sending me a painting to take a look at and try to make some comments on here over the weekend before our next class. Let's see if I can help you out, if I can make sense of it a little bit for us. So let me pull up your slides here. Great. So this is the new painting on the left. This is the painting on the right that you showed us last class. And you said that you struggled a little bit with the one on the left. So let me see if I can't kind of make sense of what's happening here. Just to kind of refresh ourselves on what's going on with you in the class. You've been working, these are some of your studies on the sunset glowing landscape abstraction this session, this project session. And what some of the things that has entailed, some of the topics have been the medium itself, watercolor on paper. So here you were using resist of some kind or adding white. And here we see you really engaging with letting the medium do the work, right? Like in carpentry, letting the saw do the work. In watercolor, you can see the same idea crop up where you're letting the paint interact. And that's why I brought up the idea of a Ouija board with watercolor. I love that as a metaphor where art making in general, the creative process where you're there pushing it, but you're kind of watching it at the same time. And paint is a wonderful arena to have that happen. So here we see some really beautiful things happen, whereas in these paintings, you're kind of pushing the paint and requiring it to do certain things, trying to get it to do certain things, which of course is part of the definition of craft and and virtuosity in a way is being able to control it. And one of the, let's see, other paintings that I have yours is the one on the left. This is the abstract painting you made last session, and I showed you the Singer Sargent on the right. And I showed you him for his color palette, but also for the freshness of the paint, the pigment to water ratio he gets, and also your ideas about abstraction, abstracting from the landscape, etc. Um, so if we come back, here it is again. I showed the two Singer Sargents. This is your painting, and this is a contemporary landscape painter. And kind of working from there. So, what do I think about when I see the recent painting compared to the one from last week? Well, one of the things I see happening is the slippery slope, maybe for yourself, or kind of intuition. It seems like you're going into illusionism, right? The picture making. It seems to be in this painting, there's a more abstract quality just in terms of figure ground relationship. So foreground, middle ground, background, that idea of composing a picture where you can stick your hand into it and take an apple out of it, the fourth wall being transparent. Part of the history of abstraction and experiencing abstract painting is that the fourth wall is present, is that we are not allowed to escape into this retinal illusion. And on the left, it seems like intuitively you start bringing foreground, middle ground, background into it. Even though you're still in a murky area, it's not completely defined. It's interesting for me to see that coming about. And I didn't really realize that when you showed the different phases and asked the class what we thought about it. So this was the first phase, and this is the second phase. And you were asking about bumping up the contrast and adding this group of elements in the bottom edge of the picture. And I simply said, well, if you want more contrast, add more contrast. If you don't, which might not have been very helpful. But now what I'm seeing is that there might have been an intuition to create a series of steps into the painting. And so now it's a little more clear for me to give advice if you want to bring it more into the kind of classic illusionistic picture making, or if you want to keep it more abstract. My suggestion would be to really mull on that and decide what you prefer, because that's how it seems to be playing out. So that's the first topic I wanted to go over. I think I have three topics to go over. The Yeah, let me just finish that. The first foreground, middle ground, and background. So, for example, in these earlier watercolors, it's clear you have foreground, middle ground, background, right? These are early watercolors that you sent me at the beginning of the last session. And that is not quite what's happening here, but you do have a space where you go behind the trees, a space where you go behind the mountains, and clearly landscape picture. Um, and that is what happens with Singer Sargent. And if we look at these Singer Sargents, it's so interesting, right? They're completely different paintings, but he has the same rectangle of foreground. He set up that proportion. And this lovely painting here, that's framed by the two blue triangles of different sizes, and this kind of close up of this mountain, which gives it a more abstract feel of us trying to figure out what we're looking at, and the dynamism of these different strokes, was why I was showing you these two Singer Sargent paintings. And here I can see there is, even though you thought of this as an abstract painting with your classic, these linear elements that you like to bring in, um, it's abstracting of landscape type vibe with the sun. But there's this diagonal to me smacks of wanting to have a foreground, wanting to set up that space. So what's the foreground, middle ground? What is the illusionistic space in this contemporary watercolors painting? It's a little bit more vague, right? Are we looking at this kind of hillside, or does it matter that much? Um, yeah, so I wanted to bring all of that to bear. And the second topic I wanted to bring up for you is material itself and language, I guess. So the painting on the right seems to have a consistent language to it, and I tried to make this clear in the last class, which is that the pigment to water ratio and how you are applying the paint all seems to hold together quite well. It doesn't seem to vary that much. You seem to have more diversity of mark, especially bringing in linear elements in this painting. And you have the erasing going on maybe with the brush, where the paper has a more meaty quality, which I quite like. And it reminds me, for some reason, of my favorite Italian restaurant in Brooklyn, this little Italian restaurant that just has one thing on the menu each night. And all the food has this really wonderful rustic, earthy quality. The painting on the right seems to have a much more kind of light touchdown and leave. This has a more romantic feeling. It seems more involved, and so you have to decide for yourself, right? I'm not going to be prescriptive. I'm not going to say this is better than that. It's more, what does Dina want her paintings to look like? And I'm just here to help describe them back to you, maybe, and point you in the different directions that they can go in. So there's that. And then since you're in the project class, we're working on a project, we have to kind of decide, yeah, do these still seem like they're on the same record album? Is it still like the same band playing these songs? It is of the same motif. It is still the picture out of your family member's window. But they do seem to be about, each one is about something a little bit different. And that's what we're here to talk about, I guess. So the third thing that I wanted to bring up is the idea of the quotidian versus the sublime. So the history of landscape painting is caught up in those two sides of the tracks, kind of, where you have some of the early Corot landscapes from the 1800s where he's just painting an empty road with a bunch of buildings, and you don't really, there's no reason for those to be painted. And that's kind of part of the meaning. We've left painting the king. We've left painting the rich table full of fruit and gold. We're in the quotidian. We're in the kind of daily life. It's worth it to look at an empty road. Then on the other side, on the flip side of landscape painting, you have the majestic, the sublime, the incredible, savage nature. And because of the theme that you're painting, it goes into that world, right? And so that's what makes me think of a slide like this, where I have Constable on the top, who I don't usually think of as talking about the godliness of the light shining through the clouds and Zeus. But these paintings remind me of that the more I think about that dichotomy. On the bottom, we have Degas pastels, which I wanted to show you because of their color and because of the way the pastels apply. You have this really sharp black contrast with these really beautiful complementary orange and blues going on, where here the blue is really intense and the other colors are light and muted behind it. And here you get the blue knocked down in intensity, and the oranges are popped up to lightness. There's some really pretty things to disentangle. Also, there's use of line. But again, I want to bring up the fact that you're kind of painting in the majestic zone right now, right? You're painting the incredible mountain. So that's another thing to think about if you want to be in that place. And it does seem like you do. When I look at some of these paintings, the one on the left, of course, is about something very different. We talked about Art Deco and design and what feels good to make these shapes. But things like this feel like they're about something mystical, something bigger than us, something special. They don't seem to be involved. I think we're out of Emily Dickinson land. Um, we're not, by that I mean we're not in the place where we're lauding the little rock with the leaf in our path or something like that. Um, I feel like we're kind of in sunset, thunder, lightning, kind of bigness. Um, this is an example of a more quotidian style. This is David Gloman, the watercolorist or painter, and these are his watercolors in Massachusetts, where, right, he's just on there's a pretty moment in the day that then leads to the majestic afterwards, maybe as you contemplate it, but it's not what hits you first. Whereas the constables are caught up in this other way of thinking about art, where it's just kind of like boom. Humans are small, nature is big kind of vibe. And Sargent isn't really dealing with any of that at all on the right. It's kind of about something else. Seems to be more about culture to me than about um, some kind of struggle with nature. And lastly, last topic I wanted to bring up is the idea of the window. You are painting a scene that's looking out a window. There's a long tradition of paintings that are of interiors with a window where you also see outside. And that's an amazing thing to be able to do, to be able to see outside and inside at the same time. It's part of being human. We look through our eyeballs and we have these frames that we're looking through constantly. Um, and a window is a reiteration of that. And so you could actually make an interior and zoom out a little bit from your mountain scene. This is a contemporary painter from Maine, working in Maine. And on the left is Matisse. And I felt like you needed to see this because it deals with abstracting a thing, if you want to look at abstraction that way. And there's a way where the painting dissolves into something abstract and then kind of reconstructs itself into a painting of trees and space. Um, the figure ground relationship is blurred, right? This is great. Actually, this is a good place to look. Figure ground relationship in this painting kind of goes back and forth. By that I mean this tree is kind of in front of here, but you're not really sure what's happening, and then it gets reaffirmed again here. Whereas here we really know we're looking, this is all behind the window. And there might be moments where it breaks down, but for the most part the figure ground relationship is pretty solid. Whereas when we look at your paintings, there's something kind of vague in a beautiful way here, where everything's kind of, they're just these different screens of light. And whereas here it's more direct, you have kind of mountain behind trees, um, but still wonderfully atmospheric. I guess you could kind of sum it up as being interested in atmosphere. Um, but yeah, I think that's about all I have to say on this, and I hope it's helpful. And looking forward to seeing where you take these things. I'd love to see another version of these. And then from there, we can decide if you want to tighten up the language or the limits in one direction, or if you want to just kind of keep hitting this motif with slightly different styles. Yeah, I would say these are different styles, right? We're talking about style of landscape painting. See you soon, Deanna.